Resident Evil 4 just hit the iPhone 15 Pro, marking the second AAA game to land on Apple's flagship handset this year. It's an impressive feat of technical wizardry, but not one free from substantial compromise. We'll dive into all this, but the most pressing question, and one that hasn't been tackled by most, is can mobile AAA gaming be commercially viable, and does Apple have what it takes to make that happen? Look, Capcom isn't the first publisher to bring a AAA title to the iPhone. That honor probably goes to 2K with their 2014 port of Bioshock. Similar to Resident Evil today, the mere existence of an outgoing console generation bestseller for smartphones was heralded as a marvel in 2014, and even by today's standards, in many ways, it was. This wasn't just a tech demo like Infinity Blade before it. Bioshock for iPhone was a fully fledged port that looked fantastic on the iPhone 5S's 4-inch display. Similar to Bioshock of yore, both Resident Evil titles are exclusive to the latest generation iPhone SoC. However, unlike Bioshock, which had intentionally designed on-screen controls for a touch-based interface, Resident Evil just lazily plasters a modern gamepad layout that takes up nearly the entire screen. And the laziness doesn't stop there either. If you didn't see the game running on an iPhone, well, you'd never believe it actually was, as diving into the settings pane presents you with a whole bevy of options that frankly have no business being on a device with known and standardized specs. For example, you're prompted to set the display safe area and screen resolution, the default audio device, which is set to TV. And viewing the port credits lists the game title as _RE8 sub greater than sign. You also have complete access to the graphics settings pane that would be available on a PC or Mac. However, I have a conspiracy theory. There is surprisingly little visual difference and performance impact for things that very much should make a difference, like texture filtering and shadow detail. In fact, the difference in frame rate between these settings is so negligible relative to the PC and Mac versions that it makes me suspect these settings aren't actually doing anything at all on iOS. Now, that's not to say that none of the settings make a difference. You can enable or disable Metal FX, a spatial upscaler which is similar in concept to AMD FSR, and when enabled, frame rates do improve by about 20%. However, at the expense of incredibly bad anti-aliasing and perimeter artifacting. The scaler manages to turn distant bushes and hair into just pixel clouds that look downright awful. Unfortunately, it's something that you will probably have to leave turned on because the phones can't really handle frame rates above the low 20s without frame drops when native rendering is used, even at 720p low with trilinear anti-aliasing. Curiously, you can exceed the A17 Pro's 6GB VRAM limit for a single app by increasing texture and shadow quality beyond 6 gigs. This leads, well, to a crash, with the springboard reappearing once the buffer reaches its maximum capacity, just seconds into gameplay. One might suggest this is the consequence of using a single binary for both iOS and macOS, but Resident Evil Village doesn't. So this lazy port relative to the work required for something like Bioshock suggests two potential upsides. Number one, thanks to stuff like the game porting toolkit, porting was potentially straightforward with minimal work required to get it App Store ready. Or number two, as hardware evolves, these higher graphics settings that currently crash the game could be user-defined without Capcom having to update the binary themselves for new devices. This contrasts with 2K's dismal handling of Bioshock, which broke after the release of iOS 8.4, I think just 9 months after release of the game, and it was left inoperative for nearly 2 years before being withdrawn from sale altogether. Such theories might seem reasonable until you load up the new Resident Evil 4 remake, launched simultaneously on iOS and macOS this week as a single universal binary. Gone is the graphics pane from the iOS version altogether, with no ability to change resolution, upscaling, or texture settings. Despite some oddities, like the Mac and iOS version both having separate audio setting line items, most of the abject weirdness is gone, suggesting a more refined and carefully developed port. This attention to detail is perhaps expected, considering that there was no prior Mac version of Resident Evil 4, unlike Village, and it being a game release from current year. Immediately upon opening the iOS version, you are prompted to download a substantial amount of data. And with all the DLC included, the total game size reaches approximately 32 gigabytes, roughly twice the size of Village. However, this is also a longer, more modern game, so that's to be expected. Although this size is considerable, it pales in comparison to the 66 gigs found on my M3 Max MacBook Pro, which downloads the game in its entirety from the Mac App Store. The size difference certainly comes down to the quality of textures packaged within, particularly so given that the iOS version has a predestined settings pane, unlike Resident Evil Village. Luckily, in Resident Evil 4, at least in my mind, it runs substantially better on the iPhone 15 Pro than Village before it. While the messiness introduced by the Metal Effects scaler continues to be a thorn, and frame rates peak at around 30 FPS, the sustained frame rate stays fairly close to that target, and frame drops are much less common. This does come at the expense of graphical fidelity, and words cannot be minced. This doesn't look good at all, even on an iPhone display at arm's length. Textures are incredibly soft, with edges being wickedly sharp, proof the scaler is doing, frankly, a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, compared to my Steam Deck OLED, it's quite literally no contest, with the handheld console able to support double the frame rate at 800p low settings while looking substantially better in the process. And that would be a money-grabber headline, wouldn't it? $349 handheld game console destroys $1,500 iPhone. But I really think that's missing the point. The fact that we are comparing a passively cooled smartphone to a comparatively massive dedicated gaming console with a fan and SoC that draws 3 times more energy even in its most efficient state at all is a marvel. I mean, the iPhone is not the best camera, nor is it the best device for writing emails, but it's with us all the time because it functions as a jack of all trades. It's good enough to leave our DSLRs and our laptops at home most of the time for the monotony of daily life. For casual gamers, or those that don't want to take their Steam Deck everywhere, this is more than sufficient. And the fact that just like the Deck, I can save my progress to the cloud from the train and then resume right where I left off on a Mac at a later date is superb. And this will only improve as Apple's silicon gets better. From a technical standpoint, this is amazing. The problem is from a commercial standpoint. Mobile gaming is cancer. We have moved away from the era of charming, inexpensive mobile games because of unsustainability. Smartphone users, they didn't want to pay more than $3 for a mobile game. And those one-time purchases, well, they just couldn't support ongoing development. And so, addicting free-to-play shovelware supported by in-app purchases due to in-game currency, full of garish ads plastered all over the place, has become the norm. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, revenue has exploded. Most gamers don't realize this, but listen up. The entire PC and console industry combined owns just 43% of global annual revenue. Mobile gaming accounts for more than $100 billion in revenue annually, well over half of the entire gaming industry's income. Currently, most of this money comes from high-income countries. However, many parts of the globe where mobile gaming is the primary and sometimes the only way to play games, countries like Brazil, India, Vietnam, there is demand for games on mobile and it is increasing. Not because necessarily it's the best experience, but because it's the most accessible. And as much as I appreciate Resident Evil and find myself excited for Death Stranding, Assassin's Creed Mirage, No Man's Sky, and other AAA games coming to the iPhone, selling $30 to $70 experiences to mobile gamers will not work because it never has. Sure, Resident Evil 4 and future releases will include a Mac version, but consumers that own an iPhone and a Mac that are willing to shell out $60 for a video game are not suddenly going to get stingy and put their foot down at the prospect of buying a console or a Steam Deck where they can get a better experience. So, the onus is on Apple to either better the experience or improve access. Video game graphics have been diminishing in return for well over 5 years now. Heck, the mere existence of the Steam Deck proves that fidelity isn't really everything when it comes to PC gaming. Most M3 Macs are good enough, and the iPhone is on its way. Even if Apple somehow created an incredible GPU at an amazingly competitive price, it wouldn't pull away most console or PC gamers from their platform of familiarity and their years-long games library worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Really, the only way that Apple can win is with money. And boy, have they got lots of it. Post-COVID hardware sales have dropped across Apple's entire lineup, but services revenue, that beloved services revenue, continues to rise. Apple could dig into the coffers and give out a few coins to incentivize the work of porting games to iPhone. And you know what? Shell out even a little bit more for timed and outright exclusives. Heck, try to buy one of the last independent game studios not already snatched up by Microsoft or Sony. And then launch Apple Arcade Plus with unlimited access to all of these games and plan to run it at a net loss. Did you hear me, Apple? Run it at a net loss for years until you've got enough people invested in the system and in the platform that they're not going to leave when you raise prices. It's what Microsoft did with Game Pass. It's what Sony is struggling to do with PlayStation Premium, and it's what Nintendo doesn't. Providing low-cost access to emerging markets and making for a seamless experience for established ones might finally bring Apple the credibility they so desperately seek. There have been rumors of a gaming iMac for years. They've tried games on Apple TV. They demo cutting-edge AR experiences nearly every year, but nothing has materialized beyond crappy free-to-play mobile games. This could be their shot at redemption. The hardware and software legwork is mostly done. It's good enough. The ball is now in Apple's court, and it's time to watch them put up or shut up. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay snazzy.